Hey everyone, happy opening day. Wearing my Rockies shirt today. For those of you that aren't a baseball fan, I guess just happy Thursday. Welcome to the Compass webinar series. I'm Kelly 80. I'm joined as always by my friend Joe Basalo. Joe, say hello.
Hi, I'm Kelly's friend, Joe Vassallo. I'm a learning engagement specialist here at Schoology and also Kelly's friend. So very happy to be here with you guys today for another Compass webinar series.
So today we're talking about student-centered learning, and we actually have a couple of guests that are going to be joining us today. We're going to actually hear from Melissa Cordo, who's the CEO and co-founder of Education Modified. And then we'll also be hearing from Emily Marshall, who's an ed tech coordinator in the Vail School District. So they're going to join us and talk a little bit about ways that we can be thoughtful about integrating content for kids who have special needs. All right, so
I'm sorry, Kelly. Let's also just do a real quick check here. Is everyone able to hear us, see the current slide of our presenters? You just give us a virtual thumbs up. That would be awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I always forget that part.
I think I'm starting to see some virtual thumbs up coming in. No slides. Well,
good thing we. Hey, there we go.
All right, let me find those slides again. All right, seeing the slides now. Cool.
Yes. So these are the presenters I just mentioned, in case you missed it. So there's Melissa Cordo and Emily Marshall. As I said, they'll be joining us a little bit later. All right, for those of you that are active on social media, know that we have obviously very active social channels. So please make sure that if you're tweeting, you tweet along with hashtag Schoology Compass. And then for today, of course, if you're going to be tweeting about Ed Modified, please use their handle there. And then, of course, at Schoology. So our agenda today, Joe's going to talk a little bit about things that were recently released. We're also going to talk about the next district success route, which is on student-centered learning. And then we're going to turn it over to Melissa and Emily to talk about Education Modified. And then we'll also talk about things that are going to be upcoming in the product, and then where you can find us in some upcoming events. And Joe, I will turn it over to you for recent releases.
All right. So I love doing this because I sound like a hero getting to deliver great news. We've got some pretty great recent releases that have been released in the past month or so. So we're going to cover some of those just so you guys get to see if you haven't heard. These are exciting. Our Schoology Guide Center is a great new launch that we have. It's got the latest Schoology information in the Guide Center. You're going to see that Guide Center when you log into Schoology. Down on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, on this slide, you can see it's a GIF that's going on there, but you'll see a little blue circle with an S down the right-hand side of your screen. You'll be notified of what's new. It will be available for all users, administrators, teachers, students, and parents. It's going to be a very, very useful tool for any user. It's going to suggest articles for you based where you are and help you get through new features. So very excited, and we really encourage you to start using that as you're exploring Schoology and continually advancing with it. Version 6.5.0 of the Schoology iOS app is now out. So we have Spotlight search compatibility on iOS devices. Very, very useful tool. So that'll dig right into Schoology, and you can do Spotlight searches for Schoology assets or Schoology objects inside of the app from your iOS device. We'll also have Help Center access directly in, or we do have Help Center access directly in the iOS app as well. So those of you that are iPad users particularly, but even using that on your other mobile device, your personal or primary mobile device, you'll be able to access that Help Center in there. And we've updated some icons, made them look a little more fresh, cleaner, and more current. So easier on the eyes, I would say, as well. Text-to-speech for AMP, very important feature, absolutely very important feature. I'm sure Melissa, who's joining us today, would also agree. I'm an accessibility advocate when it comes to Schoology. All of Schoology employees here, it's our mission to make sure that we are accessible as possible. So our text-to-speech for AMP feature will be available for all AMP users. You can configure this functionality. It's a line reader and can be used in course assessments for those of you that also use AMP. So if you are an AMP user, or an AMP client, you will also get it in course assessments, but it is not a tool that will be available in course assessments unless you have AMP as the assessment management platform. And what is, for me, personally the most exciting is individually assign all materials. This is an incredible feature that since my time, even before coming to Schoology, working here, I've wanted individually assign all materials, and it's going to be awesome if you're not already using it. You can already individually assign assignments, discussions, test quiz, assessments, and pages today, but we're bringing those same capabilities to all of the materials that you have. That includes files, links, external tools, media albums, SCORM, and web packages. That'll go to individual students, grading groups within the course. There's going to be some more that gets built upon that, so stay tuned. It's going to be some really exciting stuff, especially when we're talking about the ability to personalize learning for every learner in the classroom within Schoology. And another big one is converting assessments into AMP question banks. So if you've been using assessments and you want to build assessments inside of your course assessments, you can now convert those assessments directly to AMP question banks. This tool makes content migration between the LMS and AMP even easier for Schoology customers who have existing assessments they want to turn into managed assessments. I think this is also a really good way to build assessment questions outside for those that maybe are not on an assessment management team. They can build questions, and then those can be shared and potentially converted and brought into AMP assessments. So there's a lot of value there and a lot of use cases that can come out of that. And our mastery view for AMP reports. AMP is just growing and growing and growing, and it's very exciting to see it. So we're adding an average mastery score per learning objective to assessment summaries, the assessment summary screen, and displaying the average mastery score on the mastery report. This is going to add clarity on proficiency across an entire class by showing the average proficiency score on each learning objective on an assessment. Lots of words, but basically that boils down to more clear analytics for better decision making. All right, and I'm going to pass this back over to Kelly because she is the Compass guru, I shall say, and she's going to cover some Compass recap.
Thanks. I wasn't sure where you're going with that, so
I wasn't sure either.
Okay. So we've been talking about Compass, as you know, since actually next, when we first started talking about it this last July. And in terms of our releases for the district success routes, as we're calling them, we first released ongoing professional learning, and then we released assessment and feedback. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about the next district success route, which is student-centered learning. But for those of you that maybe aren't aware of what thanks, Joe, of what Compass is. It's a program that's really designed to help leadership at the district level think about how to impact their larger system with some key features that Schoology can really support in terms of your district goals. So those 5 areas that we're developing, and I've already mentioned 3 of them, are basically, thank you, Joe, ones that many districts are trying to tackle. And the more that you can leverage Schoology and make that your go-to for all things, just the more streamlined things are, both at the district level and also for clarity in terms of your teaching staff, your professional learning, your parent community. So as I said, we've already released ongoing professional learning, and we released assessment and feedback. And so today we'll talk a little bit about student-centered learning. So the thing that I think is so important about this particular district success route is that really when you think about what Schoology is, and Joe alluded to this earlier with some of our product releases, is that really student-centered learning is, I think, what really drives our roadmap, and it really drives our focus in terms of what we're trying to do. And you'll hear things like personalized learning, differentiated instruction, individualized learning, customized instruction. What we're really talking about is student-centered learning, and so that's what makes this district success route kind of so important, because it really embodies a lot of what Schoology already is designed to do. So this is something that we really also want to make sure we underscore, and that personalized learning is not a feature. This is an approach. It's an idea about how we can help further what happens with students on a much more individual basis to their needs, to their interests. I remember my colleague Adam Larson, for those of you know Adam, saying that personalization is not a button. And so while we want to talk about what that might look like in the platform, I think one thing that we want to really highlight is that this is really about an instructional approach. And I saw Michael Horn speak a couple of years ago at a conference. He wrote the book Blended. Some of you may have read it or have heard of Michael, but he made this comment that really stuck with me. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, I increasingly think of personalized learning not as a noun, but as a verb, that we should be thinking about how we are personalizing learning and not worry about defining what it is. And so I think that's really going to be our focus, is really thinking about the ways in which we are personalizing, and not trying to make it a broad definition for that, because really it's about what we're doing with students at the classroom level. So as we talked about this at a company level, when we thought about all these different things that personalized learning and student-centered learning might mean, we really came to 4 pillars that we think embody that idea and that concept of personalizing. So the first one of those is flexible. So, and we've, a lot of us have talked about anytime, anywhere access for students for a long time, but that has to be in place if you're talking about personalized or student-centered learning. Empowering, it has to be something that allows students to make choices and make them wisely. I was giving the analogy when I was at Connect PA last month about my kids who, when they were little, if I had given them free reign in the grocery store and said, buy whatever you want, I'll just write the check, the grocery cart would have looked very unhealthy, very colorful, a lot of sugar, and that's about it. I had to teach them how to make good choices. So it's not just about open season for students and letting them just make a choice. We want them to make an informed decision. We need them to know how they're doing, how they best learn, because we still have to help them and we have to facilitate that process. Tailored content, if you've read the work of Carol Ann Tomlinson, who's, I think, the guru of differentiated instruction, she talks about thinking about product, process, and content. And so when we think about how we tailor instruction, are we really thinking about different ways kids could be processing information, different products they could use to demonstrate what they've learned, and the content that we provide? Do we need to think about providing content that still meets our instructional needs, but that can be targeted more to different interests? And then finally, we've got mastery-based. One of the things that Joe talked about earlier was the ability to individually assign content, and that really falls under that kind of tailored idea. In terms of mastery-based, there's a huge focus right now at Schoology about thinking about how we align content to standards and make that a really useful process for teachers, and also with really good data that helps them make decisions. So you probably have seen some of our content and our handouts, I guess you'd call them, about the standards-based gradebook. We'll be doing a webinar on that, Joe and I will, next month. But when you think about standards-based or mastery-based instruction, we're getting away from having students only understand their achievement at a high level or at a one big global number, the omnibus grade, as Marzano would call it, and really thinking about what standards are we trying to teach and how do we help kids know that they're mastering those, not just getting an 80% or a letter grade. So those are the pillars of personalized learning, and all those things really tie into what we call the student-centered learning model. And you've probably heard us talk about this before. We have a really definitive process we think about with instruction. We think about planning. We think about engaging students. We think about how we monitor that. And we think about how we adapt and refine that to really, get to what students need for the next step. And that might be going back and doing something again. It might be going to the next level. But when we think about what that means to those 4 pillars, that same idea still applies. So yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Sorry.
You're good. No, it's good. Usually Joe and I are like right next to each other, so this is easier. So the remote webinar, we'll get it.
Yeah.
So when we think about that step of planning, there's an additional question we should be asking, which is how do we really involve students in that process so that we can make sure that we are tailoring content? So are our learning targets in learner-friendly terms? A lot of times you look at standard language and it's a little educationally. So how do we make that understandable for students? And then how do we better get a gauge for what students' preferences are, what their interests are? So we need to add those ideas into that planning stage. When we go to the next stage, which is engage, that's really where we think about making things flexible. Are we developing learning in a way that is really flexible for students in terms of how they access the content and when they access the content? What things will be most engaging for students? Will they be able to do it at their own pace? Can we get their input on tools and activities? They might have some great suggestions on things that they find really engaging. As we move into the monitor phase of that instructional model, how do we know students are progressing? It's more important that we also make sure that students know how they're progressing. One of the great things about Schoology is that students have access to that mastery area. So as we're aligning to those standards, to those learner-friendly targets, they should have a really good idea about where they're headed. So how will our evidence be mastery-based? And then how can students demonstrate learning in the ways that mean the most to them? So in the way that we're monitoring, are we monitoring them in the best ways possible for them to really show us what they know? And then finally, we get to that adjust stage. How do we empower students to take the next steps? How do they make really solid choices with the data that we provide them? How do they reflect on their goals? So when we think about what student-centered learning really means, and when we talk about personalized learning with those 4 pillars, the Compass District Success Route is going to really kind of try to address those things and think about how can we really leverage that at a systems level. So the next, whoops.
Go here?
Yeah, we can go there. I think the thing that I want to make sure that we highlight in terms of what Compass is, and this is probably a good place to start, is who really should be taking a district success route and what really can they expect out of it. Just kind of as a reminder, they're called district success routes really for a reason, because they're really designed for district leadership. That doesn't mean that individual teachers can't sign up and go through those materials and take the diagnostic that is part of each of those DSRs. But understand that those questions that we're asking are really thinking about the systems level and what kinds of structures are in place that can really facilitate these 5 district success routes, helping you be successful in your goals. So when you enroll in Compass, you'll get a join code, and that will give you basically access into whatever district success route you've chosen. We also get the question, how many should I enroll in? I think it really depends on your role and the size of your district and what else is going on. We know that we can't try to do too much. So we would really recommend that you focus on maybe one of them and think about really developing that, monitor your progress on that before you tackle a ton of others. However, if you're in a big district, if you have a separate department that is working on assessment, maybe they're your performance and improvement department, or they're an office, and you have a separate office that's ongoing professional learning, that would make sense to have those leaders then engaging in that content. But also be mindful that at the end of the day, the teacher is the one who's impacted. So we also don't want to have too many things going on at once. So anyway, so if you want to sign up, schoology.com/compass, we'll be releasing the next district success route for student-centered learning next month. And one thing I also want to make sure that I highlight and that I'm really excited about is that we asked our Schoology ambassadors to share examples of ways that they were using Schoology to really kind of hit those key areas for personalized learning or student-centered learning. So for those of you that enroll in the Student-Centered Learning Compass course, you'll also get to see a whole collection of things that have been shared by our own ambassadors. All right, so with that, we're going to actually turn it over to Melissa Corno, and she's going to take us through Education Modified, what that is. And if you've been in the App Store recently, you may have seen Education Modified as one of the apps that's there. So she's going to really talk about what it is that Education Modified does and how it works inside of Schoology and how it can really help as we think about the needs that we have with students that may have some things that are maybe part of a caseload, or they may be part of 504 or an IEP. All right, Melissa, take it away.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here. My name is Melissa Cordo. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Education Modified. And we partnered with Schoology to really try to bring special ed back into the classroom. One of the things that we were really excited about with Schoology was their focus on student-centered learning. I was a special ed teacher in New York City public schools for 9 years, in which I taught special ed in all settings. I did pull-out, push-in, inclusion, as well as self-contained. And I also mentored new special ed teachers coming into the classroom. And the job was super hard. It was really difficult. And one of the things that my co-founder and I really were acutely aware of was all of the administrative work and time we spent in trying to really focus on student-centered learning, and the disconnect between that and how that translated into our pedagogy, and more specifically how that translated into student outcomes. And so that was something that we tried to search for a tool or a solution. There weren't a lot of resources available. We really entered special education to impact students, and felt that there wasn't a technology solution, there weren't resources available to us, and if they were, data was all over the place. Content was all over the place. We were Googling and Pinteresting and Teachers Pay Teachering. We were literally using pen and paper and sticky notes and spreadsheets, and ultimately we're really frustrated and thought that there had to be a better way. And so we created Education Modified to move special ed beyond compliance, and really give teachers the tools that they need. And so we partnered with Schoology to deliver that tool to you directly within the Schoology App Center. We are really excited about this collaboration, this integration, because we do believe it really streamlines the actual workflow of teachers. And so I'm going to quickly just show Education Modified as it exists in Schoology. So anyone can download Education Modified from the Schoology App Center. We are the only special education certified partner right now, and we have a free version as well as an enterprise version for schools and districts. And once teachers download Education Modified, it syncs directly with your Schoology rosters, which I'll be talking about with workflow, and we provide to you what's called a learning biography. And here teachers are able to access 3 parts of our tool. The first is the snapshot, which gives teachers easy access to everything that they need to know about an individual child's needs, as well as research-based strategies, so the strategies that are tagged directly to a student to be able to track what's working and what's not working for that child, and then also access to individualized goals, whether they're IEP goals or English language acquisition goals, and then a series of workflow tools that help to streamline data collection and progress monitoring. So one of the things that we really wanted to highlight was the 4 main challenges that we found when it comes to student-centered learning, and that is workflow and workflow tools, student information, communication and collaboration, and research-based content. So one of the first things we wanted to address is workflow, specifically when with regards to what Kelly was talking about with all of the different jobs of a teacher in terms of trying to execute student-centered learning, adjust, plan, engage, monitor, and there's a lot of different things that teachers have to do, and there's so many demands of the job, and frankly, no workflow tools to do them all in one place. And so that was our main goal when integrating with Schoology, was to be able to provide teachers with workflow tools all in one place. So while teachers are in Schoology, they can instantly access Education Modified to be able to do things like collect data, adjust their workflow, being able to plan accordingly and engage students accordingly. And one of the tools that we built out specifically where that was our goals tool. So here, teachers are able to access goals for a child, not only be able to access the different data collection tools that are being associated with that. So as I mentioned before, we go into districts all the time and teachers are still using binders and spreadsheets and pieces of paper to collect data, collaborate data, hundreds of spreadsheets and Excel files. And here we just give teachers a really easy way to be able to collect data. So anyone who has a child in their existing rosters in Schoology can access this information, can access the data collection tools, can input data, and as soon as you have more than a few data points, we automatically then generate a graph for you. And so really just streamlining that workflow and progress monitoring tool was really important for our end users, and just putting everything all in one place. Lastly, in terms of workflow, We also have a document integration section, which I'll get back to later. The next piece that I wanted to address in terms of challenges for, oh no, before we get to that, we would like to do a poll. I'm sorry. We'd like to have this be a conversation with our guests. So you can just take a couple minutes to fill out the quick poll. And to what extent are you already utilizing Schoology to address student-centered learning? We see a lot of answers coming in, so.
And while those are coming in, we got a question, actually, Melissa, from one of the folks who's watching the webinar today. Can parents see that progress towards progress monitoring goals? You're going to be talking about that a little bit later, right?
So we are going to talk about that a little bit later, but I can address that while answers are still coming in. Right now, we do not have a parent portal or parent access to Education Modified. However, we are working on specific parent reports that will include that progress monitoring. And so that's on our roadmap and will be released in the fall.
Okay, great. So looks like we've got about 70% that have voted. So I'm going to go ahead and close that poll, and let's just take a look at what the responses were.
Yeah. So it looks like a lot of people are trying to use or utilize Schoology to address student-centered learning, but not really to the extent at which maybe they would like. Kelly, I don't know if you want to glean anything else from that. Hopefully we can address some of those things here.
Yeah, I think some of it also comes back to what you mentioned earlier, Melissa, about how it's hard to do. I mean, it's difficult to think about meeting the needs of, all students. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to turn this right back over to you.
Yeah, so that brings us to our second piece, which is access to student information. One of the things that we found was super challenging about student-centered learning was actually the students' information themselves, right? So we know that student-centered learning must be tailored to a student needs, but often those needs are not easily communicated, especially from teacher to teacher or from year to year. And so the first thing we talk about is access to this. And this really seems quite simple, but we really wanted to bring it to the forefront of what we were trying to do with Education Modified. So back to our snapshot feature in Education Modified, one of the first things that we like to do is to make sure that their learning needs information is filled out. And we support districts in adding this data, but being really specific about the learning needs of a child. If a child has a diagnosis, or a subpopulation or a special population category, it's really important that every teacher has access to that in a really easy way. And so here we pull from the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic side of testing, as well as the IDEA, which is the federal special education categories, to give teachers really quick information as to what those diagnoses mean. So for example, we know more about special ed and neurodiversity than we ever had before. And so it's really important that teachers have this quick access, and we know teachers don't have time to get this information themselves, or often the professional development is not there. So for example, with dyslexia, we provide them with the skill gaps that are associated with dyslexia, any sort of articles and videos and the latest research that is coming out, as well as the diagnostic criteria and how that manifests in the classroom. So that's just on-demand professional development available to teachers at their fingertips. We also wanted to be able to, kind of share this with you. So everyone should have a free resource. If you are attending this webinar right now, we have a handout for you of all the disability classifications in a packet, in an interactive packet for you. So that's available in this webinar. Before I move on quickly to the What Every Teacher Needs to Know, I would love to introduce Emily Marshall. who is the Education Technology Coordinator at Vail School District, whose middle schools use Education Modified in Schoology. Emily, I would love to welcome you, and we'd like to hear a little bit about how your district is experiencing using Education Modified, specifically with accessing student information.
Thank you, Melissa. Some of the experiences we've had, and I think the thing that I love most about Education Modified is that it integrates really well into Schoology. So we found when we were introducing it to teachers, it didn't feel like a brand new tool they had to learn. It just felt like an extension of a tool they already had and were familiar with. It's great because it allows teachers to take that tool and meet students where they are. In the past, we'd have stacks of IEPs and 504s for everyone in your class, and you had to find a way to get through all the information, digest it, and then use it every day in your classroom. And it's just a really overwhelming task for a lot of people. So now with Education Modified, whether our student has an IEP, a 504, or really any unique needs that teachers need to know about, it's readily available and easily digestible within Education Modified. Not only that, they also access that information much earlier. So for example, in the past, it would be 1, 2, maybe 3 weeks into school before a teacher would even get a copy of an IEP. Now, as soon as we do the rollover in the middle of the summer, teachers can access all that information for everyone in their classroom. So it's a huge help for teachers to be able to go through that information and learn about their kids before they even start the school year. Another great feature we love that you can easily associate teacher observations with a student. So as a teacher learns what works for a student or doesn't work, they can put it in there, and that information is automatically passed on to teachers in following years.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily. We're really excited to work with you, partner with your administration as well as your teachers. It's been really great to hear the feedback. Kind of to piggyback upon that is the next big challenge we see. But before we do that, we are going to go to another poll. We would love to hear kind of about more from the audience in terms of some of their populations that they specifically struggle with to engage in student-centered learning.
Melissa, while people are actually voting, I also wanted to just kind of mention how cool it is, I think, to have all that information so readily available. I know that as a high school English teacher, I had to rely really heavily on the folks that were assigned to the students that had special needs or IEPs in my classroom. So in some cases that was a co-teacher, in some cases it was the case manager, but those folks are so busy. And sometimes I just wanted to know more about what exactly some of those things meant. So I'd see the flag in the student information system, but like, okay, so what exactly what does that really mean? I don't want to only rely on, the expert, and those folks are amazing and they're amazing resources, but they're also limited in terms of their time. So I think that's a really interesting thing, I think, is making that information readily available.
Yeah, and that was something that, we really thought a lot about in terms of leveraging technology. I mean, as humans and then also as professionals, we have all of this technology that provides us with instant access to all of the information that we need at our fingertips. And so as a team here at Education Modified, we just couldn't get over why wasn't that available for our students with special needs, our English language learners. And that was something that we just couldn't get over, and really thought that we should be able to leverage some technology to really help teachers and empower them to expand their potential in their work, right? There's just one person. And we can use technology to help ease that burden.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll.
Yeah.
Let's see what the responses were.
Yeah. Very evenly distributed with mostly students with unidentified needs. Yes, that is something that we also really want to help be able to address, which I will definitely get to in our last part with the research-based strategies and RTI and MTSS. I think that one of the things with students with unidentified needs is that the more that we can track professional memory of teachers, as well as streamline data, we can more quickly get to students who maybe need to be identified or prevent students from falling through the cracks. So that, brings me to just kind of this really quick, whenever I think about my classroom and my students, I taught in Brooklyn, I taught at a very high needs at-risk school, and this was what some of my classroom looked like. And, as Kelly mentioned, it's just like, it's almost an impossible feat, right? And so one of the things that beyond just the information about students and their needs, one of the things that is really important, you have the free resource already. One of the things that is really important is this communication and collaboration. And what we like to call that here, is really identified as capturing and sharing the professional memory of teachers. And so there just isn't enough time, as you said, to collaborate or communicate. We believe that we can leverage technology in a meaningful way to do so, especially once you know a child's needs or once you've spent enough time with a child. Teachers are amazing at building relationships with students and being able to then pass on that information. How can we share that information in a really meaningful way? And so that's part of what we built out the learning biography for. And so whether it's that really nuanced information about how a child's disability maybe manifests in the classroom, you can pass on that information really quickly in the what every teacher needs to know. Or whether it's a really tangible piece like a graphic organizer that you found that is successful for a student, being able to provide that tangible, relevant information that follows the student can be captured here in the learning biography. I wanted to highlight our document integration as part of both our workflow and collaboration and communication. Education Modified really tries to leverage these other workflow tools such as Google Drive, OneDrive, Dropbox, so teachers who are already doing work of capturing their professional memory, whether it's in a note log or case management meeting notes, teachers can document live links and be able to put them directly to the student. One of the things that we found is that teachers have a million things in a million places. And so rather than emailing it out over and over again or having to share again in your Google Drive, we can leverage some of those things that you're already using and tie them directly to the student. And then that passes on from year to year. Some of the other pieces about collaboration we feel that are really important is leveraging our instructional strategies and what has worked in the classroom and what hasn't. So for example, teachers are able to tag research-based strategies directly to a particular student. They're able to then rate it and comment on it. And this is dated and timestamped so that teachers can pass on this professional memory so everyone knows exactly what strategies are working in the classroom and what aren't, and be able to start that year off with all of this information from the year before. So, as Emily mentioned, being able to start the year off fresh with seeing what teachers had tried in the classroom, what they had to say about it, without having to have a million meetings, or when you have those meetings, where's this information captured? And then the last part is the research-based strategies themselves. But before we get to that, I think we wanted to go to one more poll in terms of where are the challenges that you are really facing in the audience when it comes to student-centered learning in your school. So we talked about specific populations, but what about your actual practices? Where are the challenges that you're facing there?
Melissa, while this is going, I've been wanting to ask a question.
Yeah.
I'm hearing you say teachers a lot, different roles across different organizations, as you're mentioning Ed Mod, and what I'm not hearing specifically is special ed teacher. And I think when we've talked about this, a lot of people might look at a tool like this and think, I'm not a special ed teacher. I don't have the need to look at this tool, or it's not going to be of use to me. But really, who is this tool for?
Yeah, so this tool is for every stakeholder. We like to talk about it at at a team level here at Education Modified as any stakeholder that kind of touches the life of a child would really benefit from this, and we've seen that in our customers. So one of the things that's really helpful about the collaborative part of not only being embedded in Schoology, but in some of our workflow tools, is that whether you're a paraprofessional, a guidance counselor, a general ed teacher, a case manager, an administrator, a principal, you have access to this information. So one of the things that we can leverage is the Schoology courses and Schoology groups. So for example, a lot of our districts are using this with their paraprofessionals. Paraprofessionals spend an immense amount of time with specific populations of students and know those specific kiddos and their needs. And so being able to really empower paraprofessionals who often don't have access to courses or specific rosters, you can just create a custom group for them in Schoology. And then they can access Education Modified and a kid's learning biography there. Lastly, we do want to incorporate parents. We're doing a lot of research. We're actually funded by the Institute for Education Sciences to figure out the best way to really incorporate parents. We built this as a teacher tool, both for general ed teachers and special ed teachers. So we're trying to figure out a way to, what are some of the best ways to incorporate parents. But I also wanted to point out, we get such amazing feedback from our general ed teachers, especially in co-teaching teams, to just be able to have this access, and not having to rely, as Kelly said, on their co-teacher, or their case manager. So let's go.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and close the poll, and let's see what the biggest challenges are.
Yeah. Again, pretty close.
Yeah, although just what you're talking about, that idea of sharing information, collaborating, I mean, that's a challenge.
Yeah, and the lack of professional development looks like it really sticks out there. Again, I think that's one of the bigger things we hear from our district administrators is not being able to kind of fit in this specific professional development, so specific to English language learners or specific to students with IEPs or 504s. And that's why we said we believe that we can really leverage technology to give teachers access to the information that they need in sort of this more on-demand way, so that they can access research-based content at their fingertips, not having to rely on the traditional professional development sort of model. But yeah, these are challenges that we're trying to address. We really appreciate you guys taking the poll, everyone participating. So then the last part that I wanted to get to is the research-based strategies and content. So as mentioned, in a student's learning biography, teachers can tag and track specific research-based strategies that are available to a student. So these are the strategies that have been tagged directly to Penelope that can be organized by skill gaps. So teachers can easily go in and say, like, hey, what have we worked on in math and what has worked and what hasn't? And for every strategy that we recommend, our strategies open up into a strategy toolkit, or as my favorite new term we heard from a district admin, a strategy recipe, in which, again, we provide teachers with instant access to everything that they need to implement that strategy. So including apps, downloads, articles. But teachers like, I've never heard of voice modulation before, I'm not a special ed teacher, or I don't know what that is. Everything is available for them at their fingertips. And then we always include the research in which we get it from. We really think of, Kelly, as you mentioned at the beginning, this idea of content, product, and process. So being able to really support teachers in implementing strategies with fidelity. One of our teacher favorites is the best for students who, as well as desired results. We're also aligned to standards and provide implementation tips. Lastly, teachers can always search for strategies in our strategy library, which are further broken down into sub-skill gaps to support teachers in really honing in on those specific behaviors and getting instant access to research-based content specific to those learning needs. When we often hear about a specific I don't know why it's taking so long to load, a specific behavior, for example, it's like, oh, well, Penelope just doesn't do her work. Well, is that an attention and focus issue, or is that a task initiation issue? And I'm just going to go back to here so you can search. And really being able to help teachers in accessing that kind of information is really helpful. I don't know why my strategy library isn't coming up, but I will show you. You can see all the strategies that are tagged. We have over 350 research-based strategies to support teachers, and we're adding to them every day. I think we would like to maybe go to the last poll question, as well as kind of close up. Emily, thank you so much for joining us. And if you want to reach out, please feel free to reach out to me. You can go to our website to learn more about Education Modified and our partnership with Schoology.
Well, Melissa, thank you so much for sharing that. I wanted to point out Brian, who was watching the webinar today, made a mention that we should probably add time to that list of challenges that was on the poll, like what are the top challenges? Because I think one of the things you mentioned is that one of the big things you were hearing from teachers, I don't have enough time to figure out what the needs are. And so the more we can provide for them that, you know, streamlines that process and makes that easier, the better.
That time back. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So thanks again for joining us. I know that, you know, it's great to have you, and it's I know that you presented with Joe last year at Next. So will you be at Next this year?
We will be at Next again.
Okay.
Yes, we're really excited.
Okay, very good. All right, thanks, Melissa.
Thanks
and
so much.
While Melissa and Emily were presenting, I did a wardrobe change. So I'd like you to all notice that I now have the Cubs jersey on. The Rockies and the Cubs are actually playing at the same time today. Thank you, Major League Baseball. All right, so I'm going to actually switch the presenter back over to Joe, and we're going to go ahead and I think we're going to move into talking about the things that are upcoming. So our product updates. So Joe earlier talked about recent releases and things that had recently come out, and so now let's look at what is coming ahead.
All right.
All right.
We were talking about queuing up some drum rolls for this, but next time. So yeah, we've got some really, really exciting upcoming releases. I think we've been asked about some of these for quite some time. So this is a really exciting move forward. We've got grade by question coming up. We'll go a little deeper into that. The ability to save comparison reports. Comparison reports are fairly newer, so as we're building upon those, we are going to be able to save those reports. And grade by question for course assessments is also being released. So the student comparison, yep, I skipped grade by question by accident. All right, going back
Don't skip that one, whatever you do.
Don't want to skip this one.
No.
So this is going to allow you to grade your grade responses by questions instead of by student. This is a highly sought after feature, a capability, and this is going to make your grading a lot more efficient. Especially those of you that have become familiar and comfortable with the grade by question in our previous test quiz feature, we finally got that in there, or getting that in there, and that's going to be a great tool for you.
Yeah, can I just say something to Joe, because I'm just so excited about this one?
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that when we talked about the migration of things that are in test quiz to course assessments, something that comes up often is there is a level of item level stats that you can get inside a test quiz, and so I feel like, what this actually takes that and I think gives us a little bit more. So not only do you see like the question type is right here, how many points were assigned, and then I love the grading pending, because it's, before you had to kind of remember which question might have been short answer or essay, and you can get to it, but now it's like right there for like, this is the one that was a subjective response or one that was constructed to go look at. So I'm really, really excited about this one coming out. I think that we'll hear cheers across the land when this gets released.
Agreed, absolutely. We've also got our student comparison report for AMP, the ability to compare the average scores for students for common assessments across schools and teachers. And this is probably also one of my favorite ones that is coming out in the near future, scanning for paper assessments. There are a lot of districts out there that do not have the student-device ratio that is necessary to support one-to-one. Being able to provide assessments on paper and scanning that data into AMP or into Schoology for the analytics, it's going to be an amazing feature for those districts. Also for students that are not able to take a computer-based test. There are going to be scenarios for that. So this is a huge deal in my mind. And I'm going to speak for Kelly. She agrees.
I totally agree. It's funny, like I always railed against printing when I was at the district level, but it wasn't printing. It was, what I was railing against was pointless printing. I'm fine with purposeful paper. And I feel like there is a time and a place where you do have to have something that is printed. And we've gotten this question a lot for, if you have a student who has an accommodation, or even like you said, Joe, we just don't have enough devices. How do we kind of account for that? So obviously this loses some of the magic of tech enhanced questions, but you still get to gather that data. And ultimately, we'll get there. This is like I think this is a good step until we do have all kids that are able to access on devices.
Absolutely.
So
And,
we did get a question, sorry. It says, oh yeah. It just says, does that mean there'll be a way to print a scannable version of the assessment? Yeah, well, what this basically is this is just like scanning in the answer key. And I think that's your question, Lori. So you can print the assessment now. This is just a way to just scan in just the answer key. I don't know if that answers your question. I hope it did. So, sorry, Joe.
No worries. And we want you guys to look for us. Look for us.
Yeah. So actually, when we're talking about upcoming events, this time of year is tricky because everyone is either their spring breaks happening. A lot of schools are tackling, statewide assessments. But there's still things going on. We'll still be out and about. So COSIN is happening in Portland, Oregon this year, and I'll be there actually along with Joel Hames, who's our VP of Product, and Dave Schutz, who's our Director of Enterprise Sales. Joel is actually going to be presenting. I don't know if people know this, but Joel Hames is actually on the board for IMS Global. And so he's really doing a lot of work in terms of how we can really make our tools work interoperably. That's hard to say, with other things. He'll be presenting on how Schoology should be or Schoology is the ecosystem. So that's COSIN. He'll be presenting on April 2nd for those of you that are going to be there. If you are going to be there, we'll have a booth, so please stop by. We'll also be the Lead 3 Symposium, April 11th through 13th, and then also GSSA, April 17th to the 18th. And then when we look to next month, in May, the IMS Global Lilly Conference, which is the Learning Institute for Leadership. Oh, I'm going to mess it up. I knew I was going to have a flashcard with this on it. The Learning Impact for Leadership Institute. I'm really hoping that's correct because I'm going to be there and presenting. So before May, I'll know how to say that. That'll be May 20th through May 23rd. And then, of course, ISTE in Philadelphia this year, June 23rd through June 26th. And then Connect Ohio on June 20th. Super excited about that one. One of my favorite people, Dave Wallace, is spearheading that one. So those are our upcoming events, but there's an even bigger event coming.
Is there?
I think so. I've heard a rumor. Yeah.
It is. There it is.
Next, yes, the agenda's live. So if you were curious what kinds of sessions were going to be kind of happening during the next event, this is in Boca Raton, Florida. You can actually build your own agenda. We've got a discount code to get 10% off. And Joe, I don't know if do you know when that expires?
Next Friday, that will expire.
Okay, so hurry, yeah. Take advantage before the end of next week. So, as always, we're super excited about Next. It's just an amazing event, and we're already seeing a lot of positive buzz on social media. So we hope to see you at Next in July.
Yeah, and if you want to see Kelly and myself IRL, come see us there. So take advantage of that special code up until next Friday, and
yes,
we're excited to see you at Next in Boca.
Yes, in Boca. Okay, so there's the Compass slide up again, in case you missed it. Schoology.com/compass. And then just so everyone here is aware, we'll be also talking about those other district success suites that we're releasing in the coming months. We'll be trying to hit those once a month as we continue on. So thanks again for joining us for the Compass webinar series. Happy opening day, happy Thursday. Joe, thanks as always for being my co-presenter and partner on these. And thanks again to Melissa Cordo and Emily for stopping by today and telling us a little bit more about student-centered learning in Ed Modified.
Thanks so much.
Okay, and as a final note, if you want a recording of this, just as a reminder, you will be getting an email that has a link to this in the next couple of days. So if you missed it or missed part of it, you'll still have a chance to watch it in all of its magic again. All right, thanks everyone. Have a great Thursday. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.